All right, we will go ahead and call this meeting to order today. We're having our joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors. Here at the city, we always start our meetings with a land acknowledgement, and so we will begin with that. The City of South Lake Tahoe acknowledges the lands we occupy today are the lands and home of the Washichu, the people from here known today as the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California, a sovereign nation. Since the beginning of time and for thousands of years before the arrival of any other people, the Washoe lived here and cared for this place, with values and intentions that we can all learn from. On behalf of the City Council, I would like to acknowledge, thank, and honor the indigenous Washoe tribal communities that are the past, present, and future stewards of the Lake Tahoe Basin. And with that, we will move to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And with that, we will go ahead and move on to our roll call.
Yes. Councilmember Middlebrook?
Here.
Councilmember Robbins?
Here.
Councilmember Cregan?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallace?
Here.
And Mayor Bass?
Here.
All present.
Great. And with that, before we move on to new business, I'd just like to make a couple comments about today and how this is just such a great moment for us to be meeting again. It's been quite a few years since we've done a joint meeting, but we've really made so much progress over the past few years between the Board of Supervisors and the city, and really got some great things done, including our 56-acre agreement that allowed our rec center to move forward. And today we're just moving through other, great milestones that will really help the South Shore and El Dorado County as a whole. So thank you for coming to the basin and having this meeting, and I really appreciate it. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Thomas.
And we appreciate you welcoming us to your beautiful chambers. It's just a real treat for us to be here and to understand and enjoy the Tahoe Basin. So we look forward to this opportunity as well. So with that, let's open up item number 21, please.
Item 21 comes from the Chief Administrative Office recommending the board, 1, approve and authorize the chair to sign the Tahoe South Shore Transit Joint Powers Authority Agreement in order to improve the transit system on the South Shore of Lake Tahoe, and 2, conduct a site visit of points of interest within the Lake Tahoe Basin. Only the City of South Lake Tahoe manager and mayor will be participating in the site visits. The other City of South Lake Tahoe council members will not be participating.
Good morning, Sue.
Good morning. Sue Henneke, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. So I'm just going to provide a little bit of brief context and the recent history of how we got here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Assistant City Manager Hillary Roverud to fill in any gaps. So in May of 2023, our Board of Supervisors appointed Supervisor Lane to serve on a South Shore Transportation ad hoc committee, and that of course included representatives from the City of South Lake Tahoe, South Shore Transit Management Association, and Vail Resorts. And then in March of this year, our board received a presentation and update on those activities, and that included a recommendation for staff to enter into negotiations with the city to discuss a joint powers agreement. And on August 27th, after several meetings, a working group consisting of city staff, county staff, including counsel from the city and the county, and as well as Deanne Gillick, who is outside counsel. August 27th, we brought an outline of the JPA agreement, so basically the deal points for that agreement, and sought authority, which we gained, to move forward with finalizing that contract. And so without going through, obviously, all of those points, just a quick reminder on the purposes of the JPA as outlined in the agreement that is before you today. So it's first to work with regional, state, and federal agencies to plan, program, and secure funding for transit within the portion of El Dorado County within the Lake Tahoe Basin, including the City of South Lake Tahoe. So that's the JPA area. And with that, we will develop and implement plans for local transit services within the JPA area, develop, provide, and operate local transit services to benefit the JPA area. And so just want to add, as we've discussed in the staff report, providing those services to benefit the JPA area does not preclude the provision of services that extend beyond the JPA area, which we can discuss further if that's desired. And to advocate before local, regional, state, and federal officials and agencies for improvements to transit services and facilities, as well as funding for those improvements. And of course, all of this is going to require coordination among other organizations. And so as part of the membership of the JPA, we have not only the city and the county, but we have some ex officio representation from outside agencies as well. So the board approved the concepts and authorized staff to finalize the agreement for board consideration, which is before you today. And I did want to note there were a couple of questions about the funding. And of course, once the JPA is formed, the startup costs and the annual budget will be approved by that body, as well as the City Council and the Board of Supervisors. So any of the funding will be subject to appropriation by those entities. We did this week, sorry, just last week, put together an estimate of the startup costs, which will yet again be a discussion point for the board once they are seated next year, should the agreement be approved today. But that initial estimate is about $150,000, and the initial proposal that we've discussed internally is splitting that 2/3 to the city and 1/3 to the county. So the initial cost to the county potentially, which we think is a conservative projection, so meaning it's maybe a little on the high side, would be about $50,000. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. Roverud.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Henneke. I'm Hillary Roverud, Assistant City Manager for the City of South Lake Tahoe. Just to add a little bit of additional context to why this item is before you here today, Mayor Bass and Supervisor Lane represent both the city and the county on the Tahoe Transportation District, or TTD board. They've been working with their colleagues on that board to develop strategies to provide transit options and reduce vehicle miles traveled throughout the Tahoe Basin. While there's a recognition of the importance of regional connectivity throughout the area, the mayor and supervisor have also been advocating for more focus on local transit that serves the densest population in the Tahoe Basin on the South Shore and serves the most visited tourist destinations on the South Shore. Historically, over 75% of the TTD ridership is on Route 50 and 55, which collectively runs between the Kingsbury Transit Center on the east end and the Tahoe Valley Y Transit Center on the west end. Unfortunately, at times, the frequency of those routes has been up to an hour-long headways, and there have been struggles with reliability due to staffing, traffic, and of course, weather issues. To provide another transit option in the South Shore, in 2022, the South Shore Transit Management Agency, or SSTMA, in partnership with a variety of public and private entities, launched the LakeLink on-demand microtransit service that serves portions of the city and Douglas County. That service has become very popular. It has expanded several times, and there is a desire to expand it further throughout the South Shore area. However, in some areas, the microtransit competes with the fixed route, where you have two separate systems. It's inefficient. There are areas where the microtransit and the fixed route service areas overlap. Integration, however, has been difficult with the 1-hour headways on fixed route. TTD has recently implemented a 30-minute headway on Route 50, which is the core that goes down Highway 50, and that has spurred SSTMA to begin discussing options to integrate the two systems to have the microtransit feed the fixed route for those longer trips and create a seamless experience for the users. This is similar to what's been done on the North Shore, where the TART system and TART Connect are integrated. That has resulted in a significant increase in ridership on the North Shore, so much in fact that there has been a recent shift in federal funding from the South Shore to the North Shore because our ridership is so much lower. The funding for the 30-minute headways on Route 50 that TTD is providing, unfortunately, is not sustainable in the long term. That's been demonstrated in the budgets presented to the TTD board. So the formation of the JPA represents a commitment between El Dorado County and the city of South Lake Tahoe to investigate solutions to provide better transit options for the residents and visitors on the South Shore, and really to try something new. The JPA provides an opportunity for the city and the county to have a greater role in developing and implementing solutions for local transit while continuing to support TTD in the regional connectivity goals. There have been questions that have been brought up about the ability for a city in El Dorado County transit JPA to operate transit across the state line into Douglas County. We have confirmed with the legal counsel that California law does allow for an entity to operate transit outside of its jurisdictional boundary, and we have an example of that on the North Shore where the TART service operated by Placer County does operate into Washoe County under an agreement, and that is clearly a benefit to the user, and that's recognized on the South Shore as well. The Transit JPA in Douglas County could have a similar partnership to connect the local transit to the regional system that provides additional service to Carson Valley and the North Shore. If the agreement is approved today, we're anticipating that appointments to the JPA board would occur later this year, and the first JPA board meeting would occur in January of 2025. That's when the JPA board would begin establishing their goals, their vision for transit service on the South Shore, develop a work plan and a budget in partnership with the transit providers and our TMPO. If you have any questions, we're available along with the county staff.
Okay, all right. So with that presentation, I guess the question is there any questions at this point relative to what's been presented? So any clarification, need for clarification? I guess I do have one just to kind of get us started. I got contacted by Douglas County and request to really look at what's going on here and should there be more effort put into making a better existing transit group than what we had, the TTD, I guess it is. And I see pluses and minuses to that, but from your perspective, have those avenues been pursued to the point that we just don't see it getting there in time? Is that the kind of the bottom line of why we're looking at the JP? That was my presumption based upon everything I've been able to read, but can you quickly summarize that history?
Sure. So the direction that's provided by the City Council and the El Dorado County Board was to move forward with a transit JPA that involved those two entities. So that's has been discussed among the two agencies. Douglas County has just recently expressed an interest in participation in the JPA. So those conversations are ongoing. At this point, the formation of a El Dorado County and City JPA today doesn't preclude participation by Douglas County in the future. And as I mentioned, I think there's a collective agreement that for a transit user, that there's a great benefit to having that partnership so that there is a seamless system across the state line.
Excellent. Any other questions by either City Council members or Chair or board members? County supervisors?
If I could just put a little perspective
Certainly, please.
On not only your question, but I want to thank Ms. Henneke and Ms. Roverud for your staff reports. They were great. They really kind of laid out where we're at. One thing I want to just kind of back up to with regards to the Tahoe Transportation District is that initially the reason why the focus was on the unity between the city of South Lake Tahoe and El Dorado County is because it had to do with the federal transportation funds that are passed down and that are received by the Tahoe Transportation District specifically for California residential transit. So we were really focused on that part of it, and the feeling was that with regards to Tahoe Transportation District that the monies that we were receiving from the feds for California use were not being appropriated, but we could never prove that because the Tahoe Transportation District never really was transparent in what was going on. So the initial decision to unite and say, let's create a JPA, let's bring back local control, we know for sure in Myers, I did a survey and I got a response of 500 people responded to that survey. 80% in the Myers area, the greater Myers area, not just Myers, said that they would use transit if it were available. But as you know, there's no transit
Goes into Myers.
in the Myers area. And we've been saying for 2 years, the transit on the South Shore is not working. There's not enough of it, and it doesn't even service half of our population. So there was no slight at all against our neighbors to the east, Douglas County specifically, in that whole process. And as a matter of fact, Douglas County had a representative on the Tahoe Transportation District Board that heard every single conversation we ever had. So it was not done in a silo.
Yeah.
It was done very publicly. We asked for a lot of information, and I'll let Mayor Bass speak to his experience on that. But basically, from my view of it, you know, there was a lot of just kind of non-response. So it led us to where we are today. But we are more than welcome to open the doors to others. I think that the more we are united on the South Shore, the better our transit system can and will be. And so to that end, I think I'll turn it over to Mayor Bass to hear your comments.
Great, thank you, Ms. Lane. And yes, I think you summed it up very well. And thank you, Ms. Roverud and Ms. Henneke. Great staff report. I would say that yes, those are a lot of the real reasons. We also have California TDA funds, which are specifically coming out of the gas tax in California, which provide about 1.9 million of operational transit funds to TTD every year. And one of the issues that we have come across is Nevada doesn't have any operational transit funds that come out of the state of Nevada. And so we have used for about 12 years or more those California gas tax funds to be the grant matches for rural routes in Nevada, as well as operate service up in Incline Village. And we're doing this at the same time we don't have service on the South Shore past 8 o'clock at night. And for many years, it was 1 hour headways. And so what we've really been trying to say, and we went to the Nevada Legislature's Oversight Committee to say, look, it would be really great if there's a way to figure out how we can come up with somewhat of a match from Nevada that is operational funds for transit that are sustainable. And so that we can at least, and we're not saying they need to have 1.9 million, but they need to have somewhat of a match for us to be able to have a sustainable transit operation that does extend into the Carson Valley, and as well, you know, the 50 fixed route that we're really focused on initially as the JPA currently has one stop in Nevada, which is the Kingsbury Transit Center. The rest of that route operates purely in South Lake Tahoe. And that's really, you know, from my opinion, and I believe that will be the JPA's initial focus, is how do we get that fixed route to really operate so that our microtransit can integrate and really work well. And some of the larger focuses are how do we get service past 8 o'clock at night? Because somebody that's in our workforce going to work at 2 o'clock that gets off at 10 o'clock, you can't take the bus to work because there's no way home. And so we've really got to work on how do we make that service work in a better way. But in no way are we saying to Douglas County or Nevada as a whole that, hey, come in and have the talks with us about how we work together and make this JPA, you know, work across state lines. And there's a lot of things that will take to happen. I mean, we've been 6 months down this process of you as a board approving, hey, let's move forward and have our staff do this. Our staff has done the same thing. And it wasn't until a month ago that Douglas County actually didn't approach us, but kind of said, hold on, we really oppose this, and in fact, we're going to hold back funding in these things. But, you know, from my perspective, and I believe this would be Ms. Lane as well, we're absolutely willing to sit down and talk about, hey, how do we make this work? But that's going to be a process for Douglas County to go through, as well as the state of Nevada, that is going to take quite a while. But as we get through those processes and they have funding to come in and those things, absolutely, we're, I believe, willing to work. And until then, the same way that the service is being provided on the North Shore it can happen so that when we do take over the fixed route on 50, the service to Kingsbury Transit doesn't stop. And that doesn't even, that takes an intergovernmental agreement that happens right now for TART to provide service into Incline Village. That they don't have a seat on the Board of Supervisors in Placerville or anything. So that roadmap is here and happening in our region. So again, for me, this is really about us, getting local control of the transit operations here on the South Shore. How, TTD came about to run service in just one part of the region it serves goes back 12 plus years. And it really is time for us to do exactly as North Shore does, localize the transit services, and it will really make TTD, I look at the future of TTD as such a great thing because it'll allow us as a TTD board to more equitably serve the 5 counties that it makes up to serve the transportation needs. And I look at it very similar to the El Dorado County Transportation Commission and El Dorado Transit. TTD basically becomes what El Dorado County Transportation Commission is. It becomes the interface between the MPO, which for you guys is SACOG, for us it's TRPA, and the interface with Caltrans. But for TTD, we also have NDOT because we're a bi-state agency. So the job of what TTD is critical for us as a region to make sure we're getting the same thing that El Dorado County Transportation Commission provides. And then what the JPA becomes is exactly what El Dorado Transit is. It's a JPA, just like El Dorado Transit's made up of Placerville with the county. It becomes what just serves transit and allows us to really locally control how transit is delivered. And it'll be such a great thing for what TTD becomes. TTD will really so much more equitably be able to serve the 5 counties in the city that it serves. So yeah, it's, it's somewhat getting through this process is never easy because it's a big change, of course. But for me, I see a really bright future for both TTD and the JPA. So with that, I think I'll open it up to other council members that may have questions or concerns or supervisors.
I just want to say, Brook Lane, thank you for bringing this up, especially at our transit meetings because of the concerns that goes on in Tahoe. So we can get a handle on this and solve this problem that we have up here. So thank you for doing that.
Any council members?
Yes.
At the last, most recent JPA, at the most recent TTD meeting, they presented a budget analysis. The TTD presented a budget analysis of the costs of operation of the bus service that the TTD is currently providing for their region. And they compared their costs of service to various other ski towns in the American West, Steamboat, Sun Valley, Jackson Hole. But of most interest was they compared, that table they presented also compared the cost to Mammoth. Mammoth is a very interesting cost comparison because it's also in California, meaning it has the same wage laws, and it's a similar ski town in terms of expense to live, expense to operate. So it's a very similar comparison. And the data presented showed that the cost per mile was 2.4 times more expensive than Mammoth, and the cost per hour was 2.2 times more expensive than Mammoth. This is not cost per rider, it's cost per mile and cost per hour. It is more than twice as expensive as the existing bus service that's provided in the city of Mammoth. A very similar economic, climatological environment. Our lake is prettier, but otherwise, as far as buses go, very, very similar operating environment. So it seems to me that there is enormous opportunity here for improvement in the delivery of government services. Just by comparison to how other very similar regions and the cost and efficiency of other very similar regions are operating their service, there's the potential here. There appears to be a very real potential for major, major efficiency improvements. And I think that's something that has gone undervalued at the TTD for many, many years, it would seem, for whatever sets of reasons. And now we have an opportunity through the formation of the JPA to address by having real accountability between the operating agency and the users of that agency. So I think this is a major improvement, a major opportunity for improving the effectiveness of what's delivered. So there's the opportunity to get more funding in net as well, but also for more efficiency. And I think that's something that we ought to grab with both hands.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Ms. Cregan, no? Mr. Middlebrook or Ms. Parlin? Yes.
Yeah. You guys ready? Wow, Supervisor Lane. This year, I don't know if you guys all know, but I stepped off of our El Dorado County Transit Authority to allow you to take my spot, and because you brought up this concern. And so I appreciate that, but I didn't see all this coming. And I had, for whatever reason, not in the loop, because don't have a seat on there anymore, and I'm not in the conversations. For some reason, I thought you were going to try and get the county transit authority to expand instead of creating another separate JPA. So, and I know that I asked some questions of staff yesterday, and they said, well, you guys conceptually approved it. You know what? Sometimes we talk about things and it takes a little while, and you get some public comment and you start going, oh. So I do have a lot of concerns about this, actually. I don't understand. So Mayor Bass, you explained it really well, I think, at least for me, and the analogies of TTD is like EDCTC for, right? Gets the money. But then what's confusing to me is TTD has also been doing the actual service itself, where we've had the transit authority doing that. So I'm trying to figure out if this JPA is formed, how is TTD feeling about this? And to me, when you were explaining it, it just sounded like TTD needs to be improved. And I'm not sure that this is going to have a direct impact on that. I mean, this JPA is not going to be running TTD. I get it, you guys sit on that board, though, also. So that's a little confusing, because I don't like more layers of government. Nobody does. And so and then just trying to figure out, also I'm a little concerned it's such a teeny tiny little board membership that you're proposing. And again, I feel like one of the 5 county supervisors is concerning to me, because we've seen, we're trying to get it so that we feel more included in Tahoe things, and this is just more of being exclusive, and I don't feel that's going to be helpful in the long run. So, and I'm not sure if, I get what you're saying, ex officio, so non-voting members. And then, of course, the big question right now, the first thing that I saw when I looked at the agreement was this is going to cost money. And the county right now, we're being told to cut back. We're in labor negotiations, pretty contentious. We have a lot of concerns about the budget for this year and next year. So, and this doesn't come with clarity of where things are going to go. So I'm not sure if we're really ready to do this right now, or if things need to be fleshed out a little bit better, perhaps. But maybe that's just me, because I'm not in the thick of it. But from where I'm coming from, I just feel like this seems very premature. But I know you've been dealing with it this year, all year. So I don't know if anybody else has any concerns.
Actually, I'm going to piggyback on your questions for a quick second, so then we can get some clarity, because I did have additional questions as far as the funding. Whereas the initial startup cost is nominal, as noted. As I dug into this item, I thought, what about future board allocations, and what are we asking future boards to commit to with this JPA in terms of fiscal resources, recognizing the really tight fiscal position that the county is in. So, as was mentioned in the staff report, that it, of course, it would be up to the board and the city, the South Lake Tahoe City Council to approve any future appropriations. But what would happen to this GAPA if either one of our entities get into an untenable position and find we can't afford what is going to be needed to support this JP in the future? What would happen at that point? So I'd just like clarity on that.
If I may, for the record, this is Joe Irvin, City Manager, South Lake Tahoe. One of the things that the region has agreed on is that we need to improve ridership and we need to grow revenue. So I don't want to hide that. The JPA has the potential to grow revenue that the JPA board could evaluate through a local potential revenue enhancement tool. I don't know what that answer is right now. There's a wide range of them. It could be T-bid, it could be dedicated TOT. We don't know that, but that is something that I think there needs to be a recognition on, that we need to grow revenue in order to provide sustainable transportation in our mountain town. The city has committed sustainably for the last 3 years to provide transit money to the SSTMA. So $650,000 currently. As soon as we get TDA monies going towards the TMA, the microtransit service, our council's already given me the authorization to amend that contract to add $200,000 more dollars. So there's $850,000. I could see very well the city getting to a point where we sustainably recommend, at least from my seat, that we put forward $1 million going forward. I don't want to put anything in anyone's mouth from the county, but I do think that we need to look at this as a system where there's a la carte choices. When we want new service, we may have to pay a little more to support that service. But to Mayor Bass's point, the main function is 50 and coordinating the microtransit with the fixed route US 50. And the monies that are available on a sustainable manner from the TDA and the FTA funds that the JPA could go after, I do not forecast that having a problem to be maintained at a minimum level of service. Now, if we want to enhance microtransit all the way out to Luther Pass and Echo Summit, that's going to come at a cost. And we're going to have to look at this whole revenue pie of FTA, TDA, local match to make that happen. We don't have a crystal ball right now to show what that money will be, but that is how the JPA, in my opinion, should operate. Let's pay for the service we can afford based on the revenues that we have coming in. But again, just to recap, the TDA money and FTA monies to run fixed route, as Mayor Bass said, while we still have private money and those, the event center and the city and Douglas County putting money into the microtransit service, that at a bare minimum is the service that we anticipate would have better level of service than we're receiving today.
That is helpful. So I can see how perhaps a scaled approach might work. And is that what I'm understanding you, that you're saying? That we would perhaps initially have the service that we can afford right now?
I think that's exactly what I'm saying. We've been working on trying to talk with our regional partners on what is everything we want. And then let's prioritize that and pay for what is the top priority. And those things that are below what we can afford, let's have a conversation about what that looks like. How does that revenue grow? I don't have that answer right now.
That is helpful, because I think my concern is, as you noted, the full vision is exciting and very comprehensive, and as you said, it will come at a cost. And so my concern is right now, as I'm sitting in this seat, is that will be a policy decision, and that will be the policy decision of this next board, not ours. And so I was, a little concerned about us making that policy decision today. I feel a little more comfortable with the approach that it's scalable, because that coming at a cost, there's no money in the budget right now for that. And so the Board of Supervisors will have to consider that in the future. To that end, I think the one change I would maybe recommend in the agreement is under quorum, where we talk about a quorum of members is 2 members of the JPA. And just like SACOG, there is a a requirement for a balance of city and county representation, and I might recommend that a quorum is a member of the city council and the board of supervisors, whether it's a
At a
full
minimum.
position or an alternate. So, you know, 2 board of supervisors can't make a decision for the city and vice versa. I think that might be a important change.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair comment. Yep. I want to go back, are you through?
I am
with your
done, yes.
Okay. I want to go back to Supervisor Parlin's questions, especially in the beginning, like, I didn't, well, this evolved for me as well. Like, if I told you what I knew today, it wasn't what I knew 2 years ago. So it was a process. But we did speak very early on with EDCTA, with Woody. A group of us from the basin drove down and met with him. We also met with Brian James from El Dorado Transit Authority and many of their additional staff in the room. And we talked about the agreement between EDCTA and EDTA and how they came to evolve to that. Because what we're asking for basically up here is similar.
Right.
We were left out of that agreement. And that was done in the 90s. So, you know, it was very premature, but it was a great roadmap. And we were encouraged by them to look at this process. So we weren't invited into an existing system, but rather we gleaned a lot of insight from them. They turned us in the right direction on a lot of different issues. But because we do have the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency piece, EDCTA and EDTA, they look at me like deer in the headlights when I talk to them about, would you come up to the basin and could you even do a pilot project? I mean, I can't even get them to like necessarily engage on that. So the process that we took on was with their encouragement. So I wanted to mention that. Number 2, with regards to the Tahoe Transportation District, I want to touch on a little piece of it, and then I think your perspective of their regionality and their importance here is important to say again. But the Tahoe Transportation District is not per se a transit operator. They never have been. I was on the Tahoe Transportation Board back in the late 90s, and what we did was we assembled lots of money. And what we did was we went around the basin and throughout 5 different counties and said, what are your transportation needs? One project we took on up at the North Shore was the restoration of Fanny Bridge. That was a necessary component. TTD funded it. So we were basically funders of projects. TTD was a hero to the city and to El Dorado County and to a lot of other entities involved back when Strata went bankrupt. But that was, we weren't forced, we agreed to be a part of a big group that would redefine transportation and transit on the South Shore by putting all of our rolling stock together. That means Harrah's and Harvey's and back then Caesars, and I'm taking people back now. But, you know, we all, Heavenly, they were Heavenly back in the day. We all put our rolling stock together, the city put in all of theirs, and we thought we're gonna build one big system. And we tried to do it, and it just didn't work. And it forced the city into a position where we were left without transit. So we contracted with Strata, they ended up going bankrupt, and we were again in a position where we didn't have transit. The Tahoe Transportation District was willing to step in and say, we'll take a shot at being an operator. That isn't really in their wheelhouse. And it's thanks to them that we've made it to this point. But now we're at a point in which we're healthier, we have better relationships and partnerships, and we're saying, let us take back the local control of that transit, and you go forth and do what you were intended to do, which was transportation on a basin-wide level. And I'll let you take it from there.
Great. Yeah, I think you've summarized it very well. I mean, the TTD serving the entire region as kind of the transportation district, which again, it really goes to what El Dorado County Transportation Commission is, and it's the interface of Caltrans and making sure that we're getting our fair share of the pot for the region, and then how do those projects get implemented? And TTD has a huge role to play in that. And when it's only operating the transit services for one part of that region, which is taking up 70% of its resources in what it does, it makes it very difficult for that district manager to go and deal with Placer County, Washoe County, Carson City, the other partners and regions that it serves, because so much of its resources are going into just South Shore Transit. And that has made a very difficult thing for TTD to operate in the best ways that it should. And so for us to be able to move into this JPA and take on that transit, it really is going to allow us to reshape TTD into a very functionable transportation implementing district. That also, like I was saying before, the job of having to interface with Caltrans in Marysville and NDOT in Carson City is even more difficult for that district, because you've got two separate state laws, requirements in California that don't exist in Nevada, a lot of things that are a very real challenge. And, you know, with the other positions that exist in TTD, 80% of the staff is direct for transit operations. Those jobs in our community are not going to be lost. Those jobs will all still exist here. They will transition, and their paycheck may have a different name on the front of it, but all those jobs will still be maintained here through our transition plan, which is kind of the first job of the JPA, is to sit down, okay, what is the best way for us to provide this? Is it to go out to a private contractor that provides transit services? And then that transition plan will form. And then TTD, as a board member at TTD, we have a lot of work to kind of reshape the TTD in a sense and look at what is the best way for us to staff TTD for its mission and what it will become when it isn't providing the transit service, which again, to me, is incredibly exciting for all the regional partners. And then as far as with Douglas County, again, we absolutely welcome Douglas County to come into our JPA meetings and start to join those, and also to start having the discussions with us around, hey, is this, do we want to look at bringing Douglas County in, or is it best to do what they do on the North Shore and have an intergovernmental agreement that allows us to serve the Kingsbury Transit Center? And then there's some talk, you know, what do we do with the rural routes, which are purely Nevada routes? And that's really where, you know, Nevada and Douglas County needs to look at, okay, the grant match that we have been paying from the TDA funds, from the California funds for those rural match, you know, they need to figure out where is that funding going to come from? And that's the work that needs to happen for them to really come in and we make an agreement that they're either ex officio members of the JPA, because there's a lot of legal analysis of what does it mean if we bring in Nevada as a voting member of the JPA. So you know, that's a process that will take 6 or 8 months. We've been taking the last 6 months to get here today, and it's great that Douglas County has come and said, hey, we want to have those talks. Well, great. We are absolutely ready to have those discussions with Douglas. But there's a lot to find out, and it's hard. You know, we can't predict the future and the way that that's going to go. But this is really, it is about local control, and it does make, in my mind, such a brighter future for TTD and for the entire region and transportation. So yeah, I think I covered most of that.
All right, are there any other questions or concerns before we go to public comment?
I had one real quick, and this may go to Deanne.
Mike?
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's in regards to the termination process, because I can see where this gets started. We do a lot of good things, and then maybe there's some point where we say, well, this is not the ultimate solution. The JPA should be dissolved and move in a different direction. The one thing that concerns me with the language is that the agreement can't be terminated until all bonds and other instruments of indebtedness issued by the authority have been paid for and resolved. And I guess my question is, looking forward, is there an anticipation that there will be significant bond indebtedness associated with the operation of this JPA? Because I'm trying to get a front-end look of where do we think we're going to end up in a year or 2 years, right? Just a little bit of forethought. So I'm not sure if...
I'll take that.
Okay, Joe.
Supervisor Heidel. Again, Joe Irvin for the record. I do not anticipate bonding initially. And if it was, it would be long after the JPA is high functioning, established, developing longer term capital, facility plans, et cetera. But in the interim and the next 5 years, not even a conversation would be my recommendation.
Excellent. That's what I had hoped, because that makes it a lot easier, I think, to make a decision today, at least from my perspective.
Okay,
So,
all
thank
right,
you.
very good. All
And I
right.
think just from the Board of Supervisors' perspective, Ms. Henneke, I just would like to hear you kind of weigh in on your thoughts on that, too. I want to give a
Good.
high level of confidence here.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to add on to that, to incur any indebtedness would require a unanimous vote of the board. So not just there's a number of items that require that unanimous vote, and that is one of them. So the county would have to.
Sorry,
move forward
clarifying
with that.
question, the JPA board or each of our separate
Sorry,
boards?
the JPA board.
Ah, thank you for that. Okay.
So wait, say that again.
For the JPA to incur any debt would require a unanimous vote of the entire JPA board.
Which are two people.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Three
three.
people.
Three, oh, that's right.
Three
So
people,
the
and
county,
that's my,
the county would have to consent to that as well. So the entire board, including the county, would have to agree to take on debt.
what do you, including the county, what are you talking about?
The three people on the JPA board, including the county representative.
One person
Right.
from the Board of
I know, but
Supervisors.
just listen to them.
But
Yeah.
it's a unanimous vote. So basically, until and unless you incur debt, you have maximum flexibility to exit this agreement, this JPA agreement. And to Supervisor Thomas's question about the funding earlier and which board approves the funding, even those startup costs at that estimated amount, that would not be potentially approved until next year and when our new county board is seated.
Right.
As well. So if that provides any.
Well, and that was my concern, that this board would be making decisions for the future board. So once again, just to Vice Chair Heidel's position, that there's off-roads here and like you said, maximum flexibility until indebtedness is incurred. That gives me a little more assurance that we're not tying future boards' hands and future policy decisions that the board may need to make in potentially difficult financial times.
And we were careful to craft the process for adopting the JPA budget and the startup amounts around both the city and the board's budget process, so that we would have plenty of opportunity for these decisions to be kind of made in advance. In my view, it would be sort of conceptual discussion at the JPA, then the city and the county's bodies would weigh in before final approval of those JPA budgets. But that's kind of my notion of how that would work.
Okay, and I guess my other final question is on the makeup of the JPA board. It's a member of the Board of Supervisors and an alternate. Is it the thought that the alternate is also a member of the Board of Supervisors? So it's two supervisors?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
And Ms. Henneke, I just want to clarify one more time before you leave to make sure that we're all thinking the same thing. Around bond indebtedness, if that became an issue, it would go to the Transit JPA board first for discussion, and it would take a unanimous vote for that to go then back before each of our elected boards. So it would, if I was on that board and I voted to, some kind of bond indebtedness of $100 million, and the three of us agreed, it would then go back to our boards for further approval?
No.
I think that's actually a point we could probably flesh out better. That process is not spelled out in the agreement beyond the fact that it requires the unanimous vote of the JPA board.
I'm seeing our legal
But
counsel.
I think, there are questions about what each of those members can obligate that full body to. So that might be something we want to further articulate in a policy at some point.
Yeah,
Okay,
Ms. Gillick, thank you for weighing in on
Yes.
clarifying this important point for us.
Gillick, Special Counsel to the City and the County regarding the formation of the JPA. Just to clarify, the JPA is a separate legal entity, so the liabilities of the JPA are not separate and independent liabilities of the member agencies, being the city and the county. So it's a separate member agency. The liability of the JPA would be the JPA's. The way that it is set up, you would require the unanimous vote of the board of the JPA, which includes 2 representatives from the City Council and 1 representative from the Board of Supervisors. Incurring debt of the JPA does not separately require a vote of the member agency council and the Board of Supervisors. The way the budget was set up was the give and take that the JPA would set and make recommendations regarding a budget, requesting funding from its member agencies, recognizing that the member agencies must approve the allocation. So the JPA can approve the budget, ask for money from the member agencies, and then as we all know from our City Council and Board of Supervisors allocations, in order to allocate it to the JPA, that would require a vote of the separate members. So just for clarification as to the hats that as the three entities. And I can respond to any other questions if there are any, I know, specific on that. Okay.
And in your experience with other JPAs that you have helped formed, and we appreciate that experience that you bring, the idea of the quorum being one member from each jurisdiction as opposed to just two, could be two city council members making a decision for the county. Have you seen that in the past? Is that a good recommendation?
We have. There's lots of JPAs or, kind of inter-regional governments that have different quorum requirements. That's one of the purposes of why we put in the unanimous vote for certain things in this JPA, the way that we recommended that. Given the discussion and Supervisor Thomas's comments, my recommendation is in section 6C5 on quorum to add in the first sentence where it says a quorum must be 2 members, to add at the end of that sentence, which must include 1 member representing the city and 1 member representing the county as to the quorum. So in other words, there can't be a meeting of the JPA unless there's a member of the Board of Supervisors there.
Yeah, that's good clarification.
So it's
Yes,
just
that's
the
important.
quorum requirement. The vote requirement is still a majority could vote, but the quorum, there can't be a meeting without the Board of Supervisors. So I think that based on your discussion, that is one recommendation for the JPA agreement.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Deanne. Appreciate it.
Thank
Any further questions for Deanne?
I did have just one other question, just to clarify. So in approving bonds or like bond pooling, for instance, we would have to go back to each respective board if we were to approve bonds, especially through a bond pool. Is that not true?
That is not correct. The JPA has authority to approve bonds, and that bond approval would be done by the JPA board. And under the agreement, it would require a unanimous vote. And those bonds would be taken out and held by the JPA and the JPA itself. I represented an entity that went away, was dissolved, and LAFCO amended it, approved it to be annexed to another agency. And there were existing bonds that existed. We handled that. We were lucky that the bonds were held by financial institutions, and we were able to do an agreement with the financial institutions to assign the bond liability to the new entity. So Supervisor Heidel, your comment that bonds are, extinguished, they may not be extinguished. They were assigned to the new entity.
Okay.
So that's just one example in the last 5 years where I helped an entity that had bonds that reconfigured to a different legal public agency, that the bonds were assigned. And then we were able to extinguish the existing operation.
That's a good clarification.
So that's an example of, if there was debt, I don't foresee, and we're not talking about debt, but certainly a JPA can have debt, and a JPA often does, because there's, mechanisms that allow JPAs to have bonds, but a mechanism of how that would be dealt with if the JPA went away.
But the funding source for those bonds would be the member agencies.
It all depends.
It all depends.
It all depends.
If I may jump in on that, I think that's
right,
great. And this is a
right.
great conversation about the bonds, what's some unknown risk, but the reality is the JPA won't have much to collateralize to obtain bonds. And so that's going to take a long time for this to get up and walking before it's running. And I would say when they're sprinting and they want to talk about capital facilities, that's a time when maybe you say, we do have a $3 million a year funding source where 1/6 of that could be dedicated for the debt service for 20 years or whatnot. But we're not in that situation at this moment.
Okay, that is helpful. Yeah, we've kind of gotten this. Devin.
Just a clarifying question with that recommendation on the quorum, which I'm supportive of. I think that's a good idea. Are we able to make that change to the JPA agreement and still vote if that's the direction of this board today in this meeting?
We believe yes, Mayor, or Councilmember Middlebrook.
Okay. And to that end, is there a timing on this that we need to be mindful of? Is there, I'm sensing an urgency on this today, so.
We definitely have been working diligently with county staff to get us to this point, to have this symbolic decision made at this joint meeting. So
Okay.
it's recommended to be approved today.
All right, thank you. Sue?
Just one thing to consider, if there is a concern about the bonding, I think the city manager's comments about the ability for the JPA to bond are completely valid. But our board could also adopt a policy that would limit our representative on the JPA's ability to approve certain things. That's something that we might consider in the future. And we would have time to do that even if the board approves this item today before it would even become an issue.
All right, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're ready to
And
take
if I
public
may, I
comment?
totally concur with that, and that could be something that the city might want to look at too.
Yes.
Right.
The only thing before we do is I'd like to check with Councilmember Wallace, who's online.
Oh, excellent.
Aloha, Ms. Wallace. Would you like to make any comments?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I know she might have had to jump off.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, at this point then, let's take public comment on this item, please.
Now taking public comment on item 21, individuals will have 3 minutes to address the board. The timer will notify you when you have 30 seconds remaining, and again, when your time is up. Public comment will be taken first from those participating in the boardroom and then from those participating through Zoom. For those participating by Zoom, please make sure you unmute yourself when called upon. If you are joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you are joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record.
Is there anyone in the boardroom that would like to address the council and the board on this item? Good afternoon.
I'm Linda Witters. I'm glad you're all here because I wanted to talk to you jointly. 5 years ago, I contacted the City Council and the Board of Supervisors and sent pictures.
Excuse me for just a second. Is this on the JPA? Because this is not
Oh,
quite.
this is just the JPA. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
sorry.
we haven't
We're not
gotten
quite
open forum.
ready for open forum. I know, we're not
Yeah, we're
quite there yet.
close.
We're going a little long-winded today. Thank you. So stay tuned on that. Is there anyone that would like to speak on the JPA item? All right, come on down. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mayor Bass, member of the council and board of supervisors. For the record, Jim Marino, I'm the deputy district manager for Tahoe Transportation District. And I appreciate this discussion today. I want everybody to know that we have been working with staff of the county and the city for quite some time now, and SSTMA, to try and formulate a plan for this JPA and how transit would look like both locally and regionally. Our concern, of course, is the connections around Tahoe. That's what we are charged with as TTD. We understand the premise of local control and South Shore Transit. We applaud that. But we don't want to do that with the thought or the fear of losing regional connectivity or commuter-based connectivity to the Nevada side, especially to Carson Valley, where a lot of our workforce is from. I also want to address very quickly the comment regarding TDA funds and how they've been used to leverage match on the Nevada side. And under our by-state authority, we have that right to leverage state funds as we see fit to create a regional program, both local and regional. There has been approximately anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 per year of California TDA funds that are used in the Nevada side to leverage rural Nevada grant funding. That rural Nevada grant funding that we're leveraging is in turn paying capital program fundings for the new buses that we have. Those new buses are operated on the California side, the city side. So it's a quid pro quo. Okay, so I don't want this board of supervisors and city council and the public to walk away with the thought that it's a non-balanced leveraging that TTD has been doing all these years. We're trying to make the various funding sources work, both federal and state. Also, I just want to kind of give a little bit of clarity on what our roles and responsibilities are for TTD. We are both a capital programming organization. In other words, we build multimodal projects, design, fund, and build multimodal projects, such as the East Shore Bike Trail and various other projects around the basin. But we also provide transit, and we are the exclusive authority for transit in the basin. Any sort of JPA that's created from this point forward will need to seek authority from the TTE board to operate. So I wanted to bring that to the commission's, or to this meeting's point today. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer, but thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being with us. Is there anyone else in the boardroom who'd like to speak on this item? All right, seeing none. Oh, come on down. Good afternoon.
My name is Dana, and I just wanted to say this also feels premature to me as a taxpayer, because I've heard two concrete goals: extend the 50 to after 10 o'clock and expand Lake Link into Myers. And it seems like both of those things could be done without forming a JPA. So what's the hurry now? Because it sounds like a lot of this hasn't been researched. You mentioned the transition period. How would that look between taking the funding away from TTD so they couldn't operate, but not being ready as the city to operate without having buses or drivers or anything like that? It just seems like it's going to cost a lot of money for the people that live here. And if we're only going to extend a 50 route to after 10, which TTD could do anyway, I'm just not sure what the benefit is to the actual taxpayer, and why can't it be brought to the ballot? Why do we have no say in it?
All right, well, we'll get that answer. Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else? All right, seeing none, let's go online. Kira?
Now taking public comment from Joe Harn.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Thomas. My name's Joe Harn. I'm the County Auditor Controller. I would lobby for a minor modification to the JPA agreement that would indicate that the JPA could not incur debt without a vote of both the City Council and the Board of Supervisors. If some of the people who have been around will remember STATA, the South Tahoe Area Transit Authority. There was litigation. Every member agency was sued, including the County of El Dorado. And so I would just strongly urge that the JPA agreement have a clause that requires that the El Dorado County Board of Supervisors, as a full board, vote before debt is incurred.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate your comments.
There's no additional comments.
All right, we will bring this back to our respective boards and boards. The question was, how does the new JPA figure into existing service, and what might that look like? Do we have just some brief clarity on that?
I'll start, and Assistant City Manager Hillary Roverud might add anything that I may miss. But it's kind of a chicken and an egg scenario. The JPA can't talk about the service without being formed. Okay. We've been working behind the scenes with TTD staff and TRPA staff, city staff, talking to El Dorado County staff and working with them about what this transition will look like. In order to become the recipient of TDA monies, we have to follow the TMPO process to make a claim. That's an annual process that they've developed, and ultimately that will need to address what our transition plan looks like and how we anticipate to make this transition in a smooth manner. But none of that has been fully developed at this time, but behind the scene work has been taking place. So on day one, when a JPA board is seated, they can start to unpack that a little more and work on that transition in a more thoughtful manner with the TTD and the TMPO to ensure that there's no regional disruption to the service.
All right, thank you so much. And then per our Auditor Controller, the thought that the JPA not be allowed to incur indebtedness without a vote of our respective boards, full boards. Deanne, is that a model that you've seen, or David, can you speak to that question, hearing some of the concerns that have been voiced today?
Yeah, so I think it's certainly a valid concern to raise. I think there's obviously been some consternation by some of the board members about the process by which debt would be authorized. But I think that it could be posed problematic to start to blur the lines between the JPA as a separate entity and the city and the county as separate entities by requiring in the JPA agreement kind of the vote of the respective bodies for that. I think perhaps the better course of action might be, as what Ms. Henneke suggested, would be for each agency to determine through its own process how it may want to limit the authority granted to its designated representative for certain decisions. There may be things beyond even incurring debt that you may want to impose a limit on your designated representative to be able to do without the concurrence of either the full board or the majority of the board or unanimous vote of the board or city council. So I think that would be perhaps a cleaner way of addressing what I think is a valid concern raised. And again, I think it does so in a way that keeps the clear lines as between the city, the county, and the JPA as all being separate entities.
That makes sense. That process would achieve the intent and the spirit of that in a more appropriate manner.
And it would cover all JPAs, right? Because we have a lot of JPAs, and I'm not sure if we have
that's a bigger conversation,
Yeah,
Supervisor.
all right,
we'll go there later. We'll go there later.
Yeah.
All right, so a point of process here with the City Council and the Board of Supervisors. I should have clarified this sooner, but do we each take a vote on this item?
Yeah, so I think you would each take, each of your bodies would take a vote on the item. I think it's particularly important, not just for record-keeping purposes, but I'll just remind the board, a second component of your item is the site tour that will take place later today. So I think you will want that to trail that portion of the item till later in the day, so that you can, because again, that's taking place without the presence of the city council. So again, to confirm, 2 actions, 1 board, 1 city council.
Yes. Okay, got it. And all right, so I'll turn it over to Mayor Bass.
Okay. So great. Is there any other questions or comments out of council members before we look for a motion? Yes, Mr. Middlebrook.
I think overall it's been really good that we've been having this discussion. I've heard, from Supervisor Heidel about off-ramps and what do we do as we move forward. I also heard that there's a lot of questions and process that needs to be figured out that can't quite be figured out until the JPA takes those first steps and we're in this chicken and the egg. And those off-ramps are a huge part of this for me as well. We go through the process, we get an operating plan, we decide here's the magical transportation system we want, here's what we can afford, here's what we can't afford, here's where we may get new money, and who knows, that process may lead to being, the conclusion is TTD is the best operator and they can provide those services, and that's an okay conclusion to make when we get to that process, because ultimately we're all here to provide better transit for our community, but we can't get to that decision unless we start the JPA and start this process. So we need to have a little bit of that faith moving forward in the JPA as a forcing function to have these discussions, because for too long our transit system was defunct and not having these conversations. So if anything, I see the value of the JPA as having those discussions and forcing all of us to get together across the basin and have those conversations. So I see a lot of value in that, and this not being we need to make this decision and marry ourselves to it forever. It's let's make this decision so we can go through the process, go through the steps to make more informed decisions in the future that are going to be coming before us. And then in terms of the interregionality, I think that's really important to consider. Obviously, 50 and the main route and connecting Myers it needs to be a top priority, but not losing those interregional connections. There's so much of our workforce that lives in the Carson Valley that commutes up to the basin and relies on those services. So by cutting that off from the JPA, even if it's not necessarily operating in the California side, that route is delivering our workforce to our businesses. It's delivering visitors to our businesses to spend money and generate tax revenue. So there's a lot of value for those routes, and I want to make sure that those aren't lost as part of the JPA's conversation. But that's the point of continuing the conversation and moving forward, is that we can have those discussions. Having Douglas County come and say they want to be involved and be part of it, like that a year ago they didn't have that interest. So again, this forcing function of the JPA is showing its value there for me. But understanding that the hard work's not done, and there's still a lot of conversations that need to take place between now and over the next 12 to 18 months. But we can't have those conversations, and we won't have those conversations if we're not moving forward in some form or fashion.
Great, thank you, Mr. Middlebrook. Mr. Robbins.
Yeah, I want to circle back to one of the members of the public who asked about why can't the TTD expand service into the evening? Why do we need a new JPA to do that? Why couldn't, if the TTD wanted to do it, they could just do it? They could have. There's a lot of reasons to think that that could have been done. There's the best part of a decade of opportunity to have done that. And the fact that the TTD's own published data of their cost operations being twice as expensive per mile, twice as expensive per hour as Mammoth, strongly suggests that there's massive opportunities for cost efficiencies to be gained if those operations are moved into a JPA, because we might have the flexibility to find those efficiencies that the TTD has not been able to do. And just by point of reference, that other communities very similar to ours have operated more efficiently. But I will echo Councilmember Middlebrook's point that there is a non-zero possibility, and we should acknowledge it, that maybe there is some reason that costs can't be brought down, and maybe there is some reason that we can't do better. I don't think that's likely. I think there is a real likelihood that we're going to be able to do a better job more cost efficiently than what's being done now based on the evidence in the TTD's own published data. I will acknowledge that that is an unknown, and the way to find that out is to form the JPA and issue the charge to go do the analysis, do the groundwork, and do the footwork to find that out. And the only way we can find that out is to form the JPA. There's real suggestion in the data here that there is a massive opportunity, but the only way we can find out if that can be realized is to go forward and try. And so I think that is the reason why we should do it. I think that's the reason why we need to have a JPA to do that, because if ultimately the TTD has had many years to expand service and improve service, and it hasn't happened. And I think the data shows there's an opportunity, but in order to realize that, we have to actually take a step. And this is that step.
I've really enjoyed this discussion. It's been so interesting, especially about the bonds. I feel like bonding is usually very boring, but this has been really good. I just want to thank Mayor Bass. He's really been such an advocate for this with our city council that we've really been brought along this whole time. And he's explained everything to us really well. So I feel really supportive of this move. I'm really happy that we're able to make this decision today, and I look forward to the votes.
Great. All right. So if we don't have Ms. Wallace, I think we will look for, we are first going to do a motion and vote on it, and then I believe I'll hand it back to Ms. Thomas for the Board of Supervisors to make a motion. Okay. And it is.
And would you consider the quorum, changes to the quorum?
Oh, yeah. So just add that into your motion.
Section C,
Perfect.
6C5.
I move that we pass a motion authorizing and directing the mayor to execute the joint exercise of powers agreement with El Dorado County for the South Tahoe Transit Joint Powers Authority with the changes to the quorum requirement as described.
Great.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second, and we can vote.
Yep, I will do a verbal vote. Councilmember Middlebrook?
Aye.
Councilmember Robbins?
Aye.
Councilmember Cregan?
Aye.
Mayor Bass?
Aye.
And Mayor Pro Tem Wallace is absent from this vote. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will hand it back to Ms. Thomas.
Very good. All right, I will bring this back to the board then. What is the will of the board? Supervisor Lane, would you care to make a motion?
I would love to. Thank you. I would move that we approve and authorize the chair to sign the Tahoe South Shore Transit Joint Powers Authority Agreement with the change to Section 6C5 to clarify that 2 directors must be made up of at least 1 council member and 1 member of the Board of Supervisors.
Very good. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right.
Would you consider adding direction to staff to do the authorization clarification as part of the motion, so that it's in the motion that we will do that?
Sure.
Yeah, I would like specific direction from the Board of Supervisors to develop a complementary policy that outlines delineates the authority of the board representative on the JPA.
I think that would be perfect to add, so that language would be great.
All right, excellent. So you made your
I agree
second?
with it, yes.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No.
No, I've got some concerns, so.
Okay, so,
I can address
motion approves of a 3-2 vote with members Turnbull and Parlin dissenting. All right. Well, thank you all. It's been a very engaging discussion. I appreciate it and look forward to more good work ahead. Appreciate it. Appreciate being with you today. All right. So at this point,
Let's move right into.
to open forum?
Yeah.
At this point, we're going to move right into open forum.
Do they need to adjourn their
So-
meeting? I guess it's a
Oh,
formality
yeah,
or not?
That's probably a good idea.
That's right. Okay, so we will have the City of Lake Tahoe adjourn.
They adjourn, right?
Bam, your
All right,
turn.
thank you so much to the council members of the City of South Lake Tahoe.
That's what it is.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why I did it.
You gotta lower it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Good look on you.
I ended up throwing it out long enough to donate it.
Oh.